Up next, we react to a lawsuit filed by a Detroit rapper who claims that a Lyft driver refused to give her a ride because she weighed too much to get in the car, which she contends wasn't the case. All right, for our second topic today, we're going to discuss this lawsuit by this Detroit rapper who claims that she was denied a ride by a Lyft driver who claimed that she was too big to get in the car. So Tunde, I want to throw it to you, but what was your kind of thought on this? Because this wasn't something that struck me as he just didn't like her because he thought the driver thought she was overweight, that he seemed to express concern or for his vehicle and just whether it was safe for her to be in the car. Whereas also, obviously, we also don't necessarily want people going around just denying people services because of certain characteristics. So, and then in Michigan, it's illegal to deny someone service because of their weight. So, what was kind of your thought on this lawsuit and just kind of the dilemma it presents from a societal standpoint, particularly as a pretty tall person yourself, so you're an outlier in many respects. And then obviously you play basketball, so other people that are outliers from a size standpoint and have had to deal with inconveniences, to say the least.
Yeah, I'd say I'm at the edge of normal tall, what I call it. I'm 6'4", but once you hit 6'6" and above, I figure you're really tall. So yeah, I'll have some thoughts on that. My experiences with my my uniqueness, but no, I this was an interesting story, man, because I think, and I was going to say this, that obviously we got to separate the fact and part of the conversation over the idea of someone being obese or overweight, however we want to call it. And I know, I went online to look at and prepare today, which is something I often regret doing, which I did again for this one, but it's all good. But because, so many people are so rude, right? Like they just tell her to lose weight and, all this stuff. And it's like, all right, I'm going to separate all that out about us trying to tell someone how to live their life and what they should eat versus the legal part of the conversation here as, should Lyft be held liable because someone is big? And I know we don't have a video of her or anything. So for people that may not have seen this person, she looked like probably an average height person, but she weighs around 500 pounds. So she's very big. I mean, it's not.
And let me restate that real quick, just because we didn't study Michigan law and the precedent and all that stuff. So I don't even know if Lyft should be held liable is the right question. I think it's just more so how, as a society, should we be dealing should the law prevent a driver from doing something like this? Or should that be okay? I think more as a societal conversation, how should we deal with an outlier size? And again, I don't think it's much different. I mean, there's a difference, but if you're 7 feet tall or if you're 500 pounds, you're clearly an outlier as far as size. What should the airlines do with that, or the buses, or Lyft as a common carrier? What should they do?
Yeah.
What should
look,
hotels do? All that stuff.
I have to make adjustments for me when I travel coach. Let's say if I'm just going quickly to, some city and I want to pay $150, I either have to sit in an exit row or I got to upcharge and sit in a bigger seat or, something because I'm tall. And the way that they design regular coach, economy class type of seats in an airplane, my knees are just bashing up to the front, of the other person's chair. Or the back of the chair. So, yeah, I understand that I am not a conventional sized person in that way from a height perspective. So I'm going to be inconvenienced sometimes. And I've had it. I think I shared with you that going to one of these parks years ago with one of my kids when they were little. I was too tall to go on the ride. It was just like I had to sit it out and I couldn't be with my kid. My kid had to go by themselves. And so those are the things that, but that's where I think this is more personal in terms of how the person feels when they're treated. Being taller than the average man is not a stigma in our society, in our culture, right? Yeah. It's more of all right, I'm taller, people give me deference and blah, blah, blah. They move out of the way when I'm walking down the street, that kind of stuff. So
I would imagine you didn't think to sue that amusement park when they
I didn't.
let you ride the.
Too bad. It would be for the age of the internet. Maybe I should have like made a bunch of selfie videos crying about it. And
man, you missed your shot.
I'd have told my son to be like, "Hey, man, cry and start acting like you're real upset that dad can't come with you."
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is that I didn't even think about negative. I mean, I was sad I couldn't go on a ride, right, or whatever. I don't like when my knees hit the back of a seat, but I don't. It's not something that shames me. Whereas I can appreciate. I mean, that's what I mean. I watch some of these videos of obese people of how they feel when they walk onto a plane and the way that the people look at them, like the stewardesses and all the employees, and I'm like, yeah, that's not right. That sucks. And it's not for me to judge why a person weighs a certain much. That's not my business, right? So I think that's what I mean. We got to differentiate that. Yeah, my experience, it's probably not as negative to me because what I am an outlier for, being much taller than the average man, let's say, is not something that's seen as a stigma in society. I'm sure if...
no,
let me say it this way. Sometimes I've been the only black guy walking in the room when all the eyes go on me. That one feels a little bit different. You're like, damn, they don't want me.
Oh, so that one is the one that you feel different.
Yeah, that's what
so. Well, see, I think
that's different too. That's not a weight thing where and I'm not a young lady. The whole thing. I get it where that's a little bit more sensitive when you're a young lady.
But I set it up like this intentionally because I do think that part of this does come from, like, part of her hurt in this instance comes from the fact that of all of the other crap she has to deal with on a regular basis, and so the fact that, again, if you just look at it from a standpoint, and for the purposes of this conversation, like the people that argue that the obesity like that, stuff like that, that's a genetic thing. You can argue that, you can say it's not, you can do it. Like, for the purposes of the conversation, the way I'm having this conversation, that doesn't matter because obviously with height, that is something that's primarily genetic. Some of it's nutrition and all that kind of stuff. Like, you can underperform your potential genetics, but nonetheless, we all recognize that is in large part driven by genetics. So even if being obese in a really extreme sense is being driven by genetics, it would be comparable to being overly tall and not being, like, a tall person conceivably, a super tall person conceivably would not be able to just get into any lift, And so I think that the negative reaction and saying, I'm going to sue these people, comes in large part from the idea that this was a straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. This is like, I'm tired of people treating me like this because I'm overweight. Because ultimately, again, if you're an outlier in size, there are things that society's not going to be built and set up for you to be able to do. And that's just the way it is. Like, everything's not going to be something that everybody can do. And I mean, the obvious example that we see with this is that roller coasters, you got to be a certain height to do it, and that's not a certain age, that's a certain height, So if you're a person who's particularly short, there are roller coasters as an adult you can't even ride, and that's just, again, that's not a purpose of a lawsuit. And so to say, oh, well, you're discriminating against me in that sense. So that society treats people that are really overweight really bad so much, I think, is really what we're seeing here. As far as what should we be doing about this, I don't know. Like, there's only so much you can do to account for all of the outliers, because by definition, outliers are so far outside of that norm that if you account for every single outlier in every single situation, you're going to break any kind of norm. There's going to be no norm, so to speak. So I think that while I sympathize, I think it's terrible that what actually happened in this instance. And I would, ideally they would have a setting on Lyft, which I thought they do, where you can get the big cars, like if you have 6 people, you get a big car or something like that. And so I hope that accommodations can be made to prevent something like this in the future. But at the same time, I mean, it's as far as how society should handle this, it's just a difficult spot to the person who's an outlier in size, whether it be height or weight.
No, well, that's the thing. And it's a good point you make about the upcharge in Uber, because I could see somebody trying to make the argument of, well, that's not fair. They got to pay more. Well, it's not fair. I got to pay more for an extra legroom in the plane, right? Like, that's to your point about being an outlier. Like,
what's fair is not actually the issue. I think whether it's mean-spirited or not, like, if this guy the driver of the Lyft was mocking her and sitting there with a Suburban, like, whatever. I would look at this completely different. But if he's like, yo, I have a sedan, a regular sedan, I don't know if this can work. That I sympathize with, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, and it's a good point, because he said it in the video. You see it that he said he has a tire issue. He can't take on too much weight. And my thing is, what if it was 3 people that were normal sized people like me and you, And he still looked and said, look, I can't bring this 500-600 pounds on here. It's three of you. I can only bring one person. I thought, and left. I bet you we wouldn't be talking about it, right? So I do think part of it is you're right. And that's why I don't want to make this about the young lady, because I'm sure every day for her is not easy, that people look at her and gawk and tell her what to do and how she should live her life and what she should eat. So I appreciate that she probably like you're saying, that she was at the end of her rope that day with how she, maybe how she felt she was being treated. But
she has nothing but my sympathy, but again, but I don't necessarily support her lawsuit. But I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
From a personal level, it's like, oh man, I feel bad for that person. That's horrible.
But I also feel like because I see this with other things, and sometimes I watch my 13-year-old. I watch sometimes the Karen videos, like Karen's at the airport and stuff. We have fun because you look at I feel like there's something other to be said here with this whole idea of this, and I'm pulling it up for people that aren't watching us on YouTube, with the phone, right? Like this idea that it's your weapon and your shield all at the same time for a lot of Americans and people in our society. So it's almost like, well, if you don't do what I'm asking, and then they pull the phone up, right? And it's like, I'm going to film you and I'm going to make this a big deal and da-da-da. And they get all their, attention online. And it's like obviously the whole community online. And I just feel like this is where I feel like an old man that's grumpy and wants to yell at the kids to get off my lawn or shake my fist at the clouds, because I feel like back in my old days, people just had to take slights and deal with it, right? Like seriously, James, look at when me and you were kids, man. Like when I said walking into a room and you're the only brother in there and people looking at you funny, and maybe even someone calls you the N-word and asks you what you're doing in here. Guess what? You got to just learn how to deal with that and figure it out and go about your day, right? Like you don't pull out your phone and like, oh my God, this guy, he called me a name. And that's what I mean. Like, I feel like the whole society is on this, like, oh, you slighted me and now I got to stop everything and I'm going to call a lawyer and I'm going to do this and that. And it's like, all right. Or I could just accept that this sucked and just move on and keep moving and not stop everything and grind my own gears. Because that's the thing, in reality, this young lady is grinding her own situation to a halt, and she's putting all this emotion into what happened to her and all that. And that Lyft driver going to keep driving people around, and her lawyer going to get paid, and everyone's going to keep living their life. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? And so that's kind of what I feel too when I see this stuff.
No, I agree with you. And that's where I think that the question, because there's times when you should make a stand for a principled reason, and if that's what she thinks she's doing, then fine. I mean, I think that the question of how, again, that's why I think the real question is how society should be dealing with this. When we're talking about outliers, are we not doing enough to account for the people in our society that are outlier in size? Are we not? Again, whether it's height or whether it's width and weight, are we not doing enough? I don't know the answer to that. If she's going to file a lawsuit and maybe there's other people that can and they can force change on society, then so be it. I'm not against it necessarily, but I don't think that it's some issue where it's like, this isn't Rosa Parks, getting moved to the back of the bus because, it's like, oh, okay, well, you can't sit in the front because you're a black person. Like, it's a different issue.
You went extreme, huh? So you went extreme.
Well, because I don't want to minimize. Like, if large people are being discriminated against, and that's what's happening, then I would want litigation to bring it out. And to force companies to change.
No, you're right.
I just haven't sent a memo out. This doesn't necessarily strike me as that. This doesn't strike me as that. I could be wrong. If 1,000 other people come out and say, yeah, this is what's happening to us. Even if I can fit in the car, they want people to be riding up in Suburbans and they don't let me in. Then I'm like, okay, well, yeah, there's something here. We need to be investigating this. But if people of regular sized cars aren't letting large people in or saying, hey, then I don't know if that's at the point where society needs to intervene and say, hey, this is unacceptable. And so I would like more information at this point, not necessarily on her situation, but on, generally speaking, what's happening in these situations. Like, is this an issue that's recurrent where people with clearly enough size just have this discretion to just, no, I don't want that person in my car? Or was this kind of an unfortunate but particular incident with a person in outlier in size, but generally speaking, people that are outlier in size are able to make their way around without incredible inconvenience? I mean, I think that's kind of what you need to know. And I guess I'm the lawyer, so I'm usually never one that's going to say it. But there is something to the idea of people suing everybody for everything, kind of just making society, making every grind to a halt all the time. Like, there are times, litigation is very important in terms of protecting people's rights. But it can become overused to the point where it becomes less effective for the times it's really needed.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this to finish up. I'm going to be watching closely because if she's successful, then I'm going to go sue an airline about my knees hitting the back of it.
Go to that amusement park, man.
I'm going to be all messed up. Be like, hey, they discriminated against me because I'm tall, can't fit in this man's seat, and they wouldn't let me on or something.
No, you got the amusement park, man. That's you got them on the hook already, man. They
I was going to make a joke about maybe
crying, and you were sad, heels. And it hurts your relationship with your son, to this day.
Okay, so I really can't make this joke because you mentioned my son. I was going to make a joke about wearing high heels one day and it being even taller. But then I was going to say we're going to have a DEI issue. You said my son, so now I'm a parent that's talking about being a drag queen. Man, this is going to go off the rails. So we need to end this show right now.
Yeah, that's too much swimming around in your head right now.
About to go right off the rails, bro.
Yeah. So I think, but we can close this up. But we appreciate everybody for joining us on this episode of Call Like I See It. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Until next time, I'm James Keys.
I'm Tunde Ogunlana.
All right, we'll talk soon.